Good evening. I'm Lucy Handley of the Ridgefield Library. I do adult programs there. And tonight I'm very happy to introduce tonight's presenter, Barb Jennis, the Poet Laureate of Ridgefield, Connecticut. She's a retired public school educator who leads workshops and curates readings for the Ridgefield Library, the Aldrich Museum, the Connecticut Poetry Society, plus many area churches and schools. Barb's poems have appeared widely in literary journals and anthologies. Her collection, Blinded Birds, received the 2022 International Book Award for a poetry chapbook. And her poem, Glyphs of a Gentle Going, was recently awarded the 2022 Lesko Prize. I need to add that this program is going to be recorded, so please put any of your comments and questions into the chat box if you don't want to be seen. Oh, I'm going to admit people. Welcome, Barb.
Thank you, Lucy. Thanks. And thank you everyone for coming. I'm so excited about tonight introducing two new Poets Laureate. I used to always say Poet Laureates. Actually, both are correct, but Poets Laureate is the preferred or the more widely accepted term. We have with us this evening Antoinette Brim-Bell, who's the 8th Connecticut State Poet Laureate, and Jaida Taveras, who's our first ever Youth Poet Laureate. So it's going to be a wonderful evening of reading and then also talk back. You'll have the opportunity to ask both poets any questions you have. Please keep yourself on mute during the reading and even during the talk back, and just put your questions in the chat and we'll find them there. Because of the recording, we try to keep it just the participants being on camera. So again, welcome. I want to first introduce our wonderful Youth Poet Laureate. I'm so excited. Jaida Taveras attends Washington University, where she is majoring in philosophy. Jaida is a member of the university's slam team and teaches poetry to students in the St. Louis area. At Naugatuck High School, where she graduated, she served as a student representative of the Connecticut State Board of Ed, a writer with Poetry Ourselves, an orator with the American Legion, and a performer with the Poetry Out Loud recitation competition, which I love that program. It's a wonderful program to introduce high school students to the love of poetry. So Jaida, tell us, how has it been in your first couple of months of being the Youth Poet Laureate?
It's always so interesting to be able to do something I love and to be able to share that with other people. It always astounds me.
And you said in your bio, it mentioned that you're on the university slam team. Do you compete, or is it mostly just an internal competition?
So right now we're doing internal competitions, but we start nationally pretty soon. So I'm really excited for that.
That's great. Well, good luck with that. Wonderful. So please take it away and give us some of your poetry, please.
Course. So I have 4 poems, and I would like to preface that most of them are kind of long. I call myself a storyteller in disguise instead of a poet, but yeah. So the first one I have is titled College Essay. 1. My father and I are the same person. We were born on the same day, within the same hour. We have the same passions and worldly desires, same nose and bright smiles. So it shouldn't have been a surprise when I learned our instability was one in the same. 2. In my earliest memory, my mother is folding clothes in our laundry room. As her hands grab the sleeve of a black sweater, my eyes find refuge looking at the floor. I ask her, "Where's Dad?" And she tells me he is in the mountains. 3. The action of finding one's way by observing the sun, moon, and stars is known as celestial navigation. I use the sky to guide me. I see my family as planets, the people I meet as stars, experiences I have as solar systems, and I am my own universe. 4. Jupiter is called a failed star because it's made up of the same elements as the sun, but it lacks the internal pressure and temperature to be a star like the sun. This is the embodiment of my father, a man with all the elements to be something great, the desire to help others, an amazing writer, a voice that leads the room, and a heart so pure it would put the angels to shame. My father was born, in a way, on the surface of Jupiter, a planet defined by its own instability, so much so that no one can stand on it, even if they tried. It's just a ball of swirling gas and liquid, and so my father never knew what it was like to stand on a sturdy foundation. When he was 13, he picked up his first alcohol bottle and didn't put it down for another 32 years. When he was just shy of an adult, he felt himself lose his mind, the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. He would speak so fast you couldn't even understand him. He was restless and agitated, impulsive and risky, couldn't concentrate, never mind thinking straight. They called this bipolar disorder. 5. When I was in the first grade, my mother would always tell me she was scared of me becoming my father. I would laugh and giggle, thinking it was some kind of joke, but to this day, she still thinks the same. 6. My father spoke about the mountains once. We were at Costco waiting to gas up his car. He lowered the radio, turned his head to me and said, "Jaida, take care of yourself. The mental hospital isn't a place you want to be." He then continued to hum the song on the radio as if he didn't just tell me a secret that he had kept hidden for over a decade. He never said anything more. Weeks later, I found the courage to ask my mother what happened. She said he had a nervous breakdown. I said time finally caught up with him. Some would argue that our viewpoints were one and the same. 7. Every weekend, my father would get up in the morning and ask me what I wanted to do that day. I would always respond with, "Take over the world." And that we did. We would drive across the state for reasons that never existed. I honestly have no idea where we spent our days. I just knew I liked to see my father smile. Now, I don't even know how to tell my younger self that he wasn't happy. He was manic. 8. Aristotle said all tragedies are beautiful. I don't know if I agree. So that was my poem titled College Essay. I actually handed that in as my college essay. I couldn't figure out any other way to be more authentically myself and unapologetically without submitting a poem instead of an essay. I think that's very ironically poetic of me. So my next poem is titled 5 Stages of Grief. This one's also a little on the longer side. I don't really like to preface my poems. I like to surprise people, but yeah. So this is 5 Stages of Grief. Elizabeth Kolber-Ross created the 5 stages of grief, summarizing what various emotional states people go through after losing someone they love. This is how Black America grieves the loss of their ancestors. Stage 1, denial. Désament is a French word defining the restlessness that comes with being away from your country of origin and feeling like a foreigner. My DNA test says I'm from West Africa, a region made up of 17 countries spanning over 2.371 million square feet, each uniquely different from the other. So when people ask me where I'm from, I tell them the unknown. I pretend that the unknown is a place where skies are always blue, children are always laughing, and possibilities are endless. They say there is grace in this denial stage, that it's nature's way of telling us there is only so much we can handle, but how does one find grace when their existence is alien? Stage 2, anger. To the ones who manned the slave ships and played Monopoly with African bodies, I think in every life you live, you eat our dead men for breakfast. Season it with blood from our kids, use our women's rib cages as knives and our daughters' eyes as delicacies. Taxidermy is the art of preparing, stuffing, and mounting the skins of animals with lifelike effect. I guess this is why so many American museums are full of Black skeletons. If I could go back in time, I would boil my blood and marinate your body in it. I would leave you so vultures could feed off your carcass. I hope they pick out your eyes, nimble at the fat around your fingers, toy at your spine until they realize it held up a useless head, gnaw at your intestines and peck at your knees until Satan himself wonders what you did to deserve such a thing. Scientists say that the Middle Passage changed the migration of sharks. So many slaves jumped the boat that sharks always knew there would be fresh food. The blue mind theory states that being near water calms the human mind. I can't help but disagree. Water has always tempted me. I'm always enticed to go deeper and deeper. I think it's my soul searching for the ones that were left at the bottom of the ocean. Stage 3, bargaining. Many Africans practice ancestral worship and believe that their predecessors influenced their own lives. No scar on my body has ever healed. I have slashes across my back, burns all over my fingers, and bruises across my arms and legs. There is this reincarnation theory that states the scars you bear are how you died in a past life. I guess this is my ancestors' way of reminding me that my people have been enslaved longer than they have ever been free. Phantom limb pain is pain that is felt in an area where a limb was once amputated. When I get nervous, my voice shakes, my kneecaps quake, my hands shake. Oftentimes, my breath gets caught somewhere between my throat and lungs. My ancestors inside me often forget that I am a free woman. They have instilled fear in me as a survival instinct. It's a signal to run before my words get me stuck 6 feet under. Survivor's guilt is guilt when a person feels guilty because they survived a life-threatening event that others didn't. I once found myself with my knees on the floor, hands clasped, head reaching to the sky, asking whatever was up there to fix me to a cross, if that meant my people would have a better future. But insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I never found myself on my knees again, not after they took Trayvon. They say that bargaining and guilt go hand in hand, but if I stopped bargaining a long time ago, why is every step I take filled with guilt and sorrow? Stage 4, depression. Scientifically, if you start smiling, your brain releases tiny molecules called neuronephridites. They help fight off stress. It is stated that even when smiling, when you're sad, will make you feel happier. Such discovery must have been made by a white man. Most days, the pain of my ancestors' reality settles in my soul, causing me to panic. I wake up at random hours of the night, clawing at my skin, wishing I could hang it as a coat, but I'm always scared it will hang on a tree instead. So I let my scratch marks tell their stories. The ones of endless suffering. Stage 5, acceptance. For Christmas, my parents bought me a telescope. I would spend hours staring at the North Star, wondering how such a thing could guide thousands. The homeland of your ancestors is supposed to bring your soul home after you die. And a nomad is a member of people who have no permanent abode. I am slowly accepting that I have to be stronger than the tragedies that define my people. So when I die, I want my ashes to kiss the ocean floor and be tucked in by the North Star. It's the only thing that has ever guided my people. So that was 5 stages of grief. I'd like to apologize because I feel like I'm putting you guys in a very much whiplash of different emotions for different poems, and they're both all extraordinarily long. And they're all heavy topics. but I feel like as a poet, it is, I don't want to say your job or duty, but almost like, yeah, I guess your job to be able to find words and be able to explain things that trouble society. So I guess that's a great segue into my next poem titled Pizza Connection. And again, I'm just going to jump into it. So this is Pizza Connection. The longest running criminal trial in US history just so happened to revolve around pizza shops. It was a scheme only Sicilian-born men were capable of. Something so complex and intricate that by the end of it all, the judges, lawyers, prosecutors, and jury would have rather let them walk free than deal with the mess that said men created. $1.6 billion worth of heroin, control over all of New York City, a network so vast that the feds couldn't catch them all, and little pizza shops on every block. It was ingenious in itself. The man behind it all, Gaetano Bellamente, hid his scheme behind perfectly crafted pizza. The recipe was simple. It was more technique than anything else. The dough was thick enough to hide all of their drug trafficking, but thin enough to get caught by the FBI. The cheese was browned, opaque enough to hide any extra charges of murder, assault, money laundering, but transparent enough to get sentenced to 45 years. The sauce was, well, enough. The perfect balance between sweet and savory, a balance that kept them hidden for so long. And they used a lot of basil, but not for its sweetness with hints of mint, anodyne, and pepper, but for its ability to cover any traces they left behind. But I guess, despite being as heavenly as it wasn't enough. I was inspired, you could say. So I did what any rational person would do. I opened up my own pizza shop. I dealt twisted illusions of happiness like the boss of the Sicilian mafia dealt heroin. He might have had control over the New York heroin game, but I had control over so much more. Control that modeled Bellamente himself, twisted and lucrative, but effective. I ran a money-making scheme in my own mind. My specialty was selling lies to myself. Depression is funny that way, slowly driving you mad, and so I withered away. I became a nocturnal animal of some sort, slept in all day, was up at all night. I became incredibly irritable and irrational. Every sudden noise made me want to skin myself alive. Every small inconvenience shattered my mind. Any one glance toward my direction filled me with rage. My mind was a minefield filled with pieces of myself. Some corners held the appetite I once had. Others held everyone I once loved. Self-isolation is a hell of a weapon. Trenches were filled with all the time I didn't know I lost. Time I spent daydreaming because fantasy was always better than reality. I would grab a pair of tweezers in hopes of destabilizing the bombs, but I was always mixed up the red and yellow wires, leaving me with more anxiety than I could manage. It was truly a war zone. One reenactments couldn't even get right. I was, for lack of a better analogy, a burnt pizza, and Bellamente wasn't in any better shape than me. He was simply put, a mastermind, and I, his disciple. Together, we ran the greatest schemes in the history books, but our efforts weren't enough because he sat in a prison cell until he rotted from the inside out, and I eventually broke, caved in, opened the windows, and realized that my own scheme drove me mad, to the point I didn't even recognize who I became. I was nothing more than an abandoned pizza shop filled with cobwebs that covered the best parts of me, scuffed windows that left me with a dull view on the world, scratched countertops that ended up with more scars than it started out with, but that's okay. The best things in this world don't go unscathed. I had shattered mirrors that gave me a warped sense of self and a leaky roof because insurance decided that it didn't want to cover anything that wouldn't cause immediate harm. I guess the possibility of falling apart at any time wasn't enough. And you know what? I don't know if I was doomed from the start. I don't know if Bladamente knew he was going to get caught all along, but one thing I do know is that the worst parts of ourselves will always reveal them in the end. Bladamente never got to enjoy his view at the top, and I never even made it there. I have to plant new seeds and hope they grow, even though the soil is tainted. I fertilize the ground with a bottle of prescription pills and water it with a really nice lady I see every week. In due time, the garden will grow into blooming flowers, beautiful butterflies, and honeybees. Gitano Bladamente, the real-life godfather himself, didn't live the legacy he wanted. He didn't go out as the greatest mobster in history, but is now used as a cautionary tale to other gangs across the globe, is now used as a trophy, paraded around by the FBI in its own archives, is now used as a poster child for what a failed operation looks like. And I am a great example of what happens when you fall apart. In the end, we weren't enough. Maybe. Just maybe. We needed a little more basil to cover our tracks. So that was Pizza Connection. And originally I didn't think I was going to read that poem, but after being here at university and talking with all my peers and learning that like mental health was an experience that we all kind of had as a common denominator, it made me feel like, wow, like I love again, putting to words things that people don't really like to talk about. And again, my poems are really long. I'm kind of like a storyteller. So I find both of those things fascinating. And I love to see how my life and other people's lives and one weird story can all connect. So my last poem, this one's a little shorter than the other ones. It's titled On Average. On average, 648,000 hit and run accidents occur each year. This one almost made it into the count. Something about a teenager driving a piece of aluminum at speeds of 60 miles per hour seems dangerous, seems like something out of a social experiment. And you know what? I'm starting to think it is a game of how close to death you can get to without actually making it there. Other people call this game learning how to drive. So my story is I took a turn a little too fast. Didn't see the man on the curb that I may or may not was supposed to be on. His eyes should have widened. His arms should have shaked back and forth in fear of the oncoming car, the one I was driving. His soul should have left his body and taken its last breath of air, but he didn't. He just kept it going. Headphones blasting, head bopping, foot tapping, back turned, completely unaware that he almost died. He just kept it moving, one foot in front of the other, as if the ground owed him something and the sky above him was making sure the debt was paid. As this man continued, with no haste in his steps, I couldn't help but think that as he minded his own business, somewhere in the world, terror is all they know. As he walks, a bomb is dropped in the Middle East, exploding men to bits with limbs detaching from the only bodies they've ever owned. Blood splatters on street corners, alleyways, and rubble. People drag bodies with unfamiliar faces, but somehow the grief still hits the same, all-consuming and everlasting. The man on the curb takes another step, and somewhere in the world, a girl is at the grocery store loading up her car. And a woman drives up right next to her, begging her for gas. And because the girl is kind, she drives to the nearest gas station with the woman's car in tow. She even pulls up right next to the woman and gasses the car up herself. And out of nowhere, a man jumps out of the car and drags the girl in. And that girl learned a little too soon what womanhood meant. Learned that being a woman is defined by how men use you in ways that only the devil himself could replicate. Learned that although her mind and body may be hers, it is passed around like a trading card. Its only value lying in special combos, speed, ability, and body type. The man on the curb takes another step. His head bops to the beat, and another melanated body drops to the ground. Another kid gone too soon, another cop too trigger happy, another new station saying he shouldn't have run. The man on the curb takes another step, and a child overseas dies of malnutrition. His bones look seconds away from cutting his skin open. He dies next to hundreds of others awaiting the same fate. The man takes another step, and I turn the wheel, hit the gas, and drive home with the weight of the world's sorrows on my shoulders. So that was my last poem. Again, it was On Average. And that one, I actually, so this real story is I was driving, learning how to drive with my dad by Stop and Shop. And I did turn on a curb, and there was, in fact, a man there. And I did, almost hit him. No, I didn't. I was pretty far. But the point is, like, that made me realize the scope of the world. And here I am just driving a car, so privileged to be able to do this. And there's this man just walking on the street, and he has no idea what happens. And I think that is a bigger kind of analogy for how the world functions, at least through my eyes. Because I think a lot of times privileged people walk around the world and are like, oh, like all these tragedies are happening, but it's something that we will never truly feel or understand. So even in that point, when I acknowledge that, like, oh, there's this random man and he has no idea what's happening around him and I'm driving this car, it's like, but who am I to say that I'm aware of anything when all of these things are happening? So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Thank you so much. Oh, Jaida, you are a real powerhouse performer.
Thank you.
Now, I wanted to ask, do you think, will you be doing the 5 Stages of Grief as one of your slam competition poems? Because it's just amazing.
Thank you. I would love to. I don't completely know. A lot of them have time limits, and I happen to be really long on the time.
I know. Yeah, that usually 3 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
Now, who is your inspiration for a spoken word performer? Because you definitely have a wonderful style.
Spoken word performers, I love people who make me like feel something. So I love Rui Francisco. I love the way that he ties like obscure concepts into his poetry. I love Sarah Kay, and when she speaks, I find her voice so like pillowing, so soft and so like earnest. So yeah, I guess those would be my biggest ones.
Well, I think your longer poems definitely fit the spoken word tradition that you seem to be really engaged in. So thank you so much, and we'll come back to Jaida with questions later on. Please, people who came recently, we're recording. One thing I want you to know, but also if you have a question for either the poets, put it in the chat, and then we'll kind of glean them from the chat box at the end of the readings. So again, Jaida, thank you. Just amazing work. So appreciate it so much. Next up, let me scroll down here a little bit. Antoinette Brim-Bell is Connecticut's 8th State Poet Laureate. She's the author of 3 full-length poetry collections, most recently, These Women You Gave Me, which Pulitzer Prize winning poet Jericho Brown, one of my favorites, called a, quote, really gorgeous work. Her other full-length collections are Icarus in Love and Psalm of the Sunflower. Brim-Bell is a Cave Canem Foundation Fellow and an alumna of Voices of Our Nation's Arts Foundation, or VONA. Her poetry has appeared in various journals, magazines, textbooks, and anthologies, including recently Poetry Magazine and as a Poem a Day feature. Brim-Bell has also published numerous critical essays and anthologies in academic journals. In addition to being a poet, Antoinette is a printmaker and collage artist, and she recently exhibited monoprints in an exhibition called Jazz, an exhibition of poetry, prints, and photography, and in New Haven, and also in an exhibition called Heroes with the S in front, in partnership with the Alliance of Women Veterans at the Grove in New Haven. She serves as secretary of the board of directors of Indolent Arts Foundation, based in New York City, is a past board member of One World Progressive Institute, and a past president of the board of directors of the Creative Arts Workshop in New Haven. Additionally, Brim-Bell has hosted a series of Black History Month television programs for the One World Progressive Institute. She is also a former guest host of Patrick Oliver's Literary Nation Talk Radio, which is in Little Rock, for which she interviewed a variety of entertainers, literary figures, political pundits, and community developers. She is a sought-after speaker. In fact, a little bit later, she'll tell you about an upcoming event. Sought-after speaker, editor, educator, and consultant. And she's currently a professor of English at Capital Community College in Hartford. So welcome, Antoinette.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Jaida, I loved the book when I read it. I loved the poems even more when I heard them come from you and float out into the air. So I'm really honored to be reading with you tonight. And again, congratulations on being the very first Youth Poet Laureate. That's a really big deal. That's historical. So I'm going to begin I'm going to be reading, I think, things from another project that I'm working on. So some fairly new stuff that that I'm kind of pulling all together. I'm going to start with a poem called 13 Ways of Looking, which takes its form from, you probably know, 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. Yeah. It begins with the epigraph from a wonderful novel by Jose Saramago called Blindness. And the epigraph admonishes us to, if you can see, look. 13 Ways of Looking. Because I want to know, my eyes break common prisms into scattered light, gather up the rods into buckets of blues. Gotta see to know, gotta see to know, gotta know to see. Scaffolds of blues, gallows of light, built on 3 layers of tissue paper night, fill the cone with spotless second sight. Understand? Monochrome blind, one color allowed, snow blind, white light to excess, moon blind, nowhere to go, no path to follow. A man and his vision are one, just telling you what I know. Through a glass darkly, Hooke's microscope, Galileo's telescope, Benjamin's spectacles, a keyhole, an emerald, a glass of water. No smudges on the window, an anxious, steamy breath on glass, magnify the scope of hopeful, watchful eyes, waiting earnestly at the window. Left to right, right to left, the truth is written in dotted permutations, calligraphed characters, code, alpha to omega on papyrus, rice, wood, stone. Trace the shadows with your fingers, your eyes, your lips. Big Mama was a seer, born that way, always knowing, could see the bitter winter coming in the glow of the firefly. Fish in her dreams could see sons and daughters in their mother's eyes. She saw sickness before it come in the color of skin and nails. Big Mama was a seer, saw death walking up the path, went right on out to meet it. Seeing has a lucid, inescapable rhythm, the drum of fingernails on a wooden table, a syncopated, alternating heel and palm pound, a deeply held stare that bores deeper down with one heartbeat. With each swell of breath, the rhythm births a dance, the sway of inspection, introspection, a slow chin tilt, an eyebrow pinch, a lifted gaze, lowered gaze, the understanding nod. There is no such thing as out of sight. What has been seen cannot be unseen. Epiphany ensues, peekaboo, when vision is clear, hide and seek, the bards of old understood, I spy and philosophized with mine own eye. Even the blind see, in taps and touch. They do not fear the shadow's assault. Their ears grow wise, noses discern, tongues taste, tears on the air. Take care, they can't be fooled. Light floods in a constant stream, even in darkness. Light finds its way. Old folks call kids nosy, but they smile inside when they say it, 'cause nosy kids grow, see, look, know. So I'm gonna do some ekphrastic pieces. I will go to my second book, Icarus in Love, and I love visual art. I love the smell of ink in the studio, the sound of rolling the ink, you know, with the brayer. I love all of that. And I've been doing some of that lately. And so I've been looking at my poems that are thinking about and exploring works of art. So this one is called Upon Viewing Kanak Chama's Painting, Waiting 39. The artist smeared ultramarine blue onto the canvas, the way the lonely smear their blood onto asylum walls. Thick and warm, frightfully fluid and dark, a poignant background to the black strokes of calligraphed trees rising, into scribbles of despair where black letter turns chignon upon a waiting woman's head and tendrils down into folds of white linen and delicate white wrists clasped behind her back, and then into a twist of orange about her neck, a crawl of orange twisting up a tree trunk, color enough to capture the eye and balance the unbalanced scribble of wanton time with two trails of hope in primary yellow. I'm going to read another, and I'm going to swap out glasses. I'm at that age where you swap out glasses back and forth. Yeah, that's me. So there's been a great art exhibit going around, you know, an immersive Van Gogh exhibit, and it was absolutely amazing. This poem came way before that, but it's almost as if I knew what that exhibit was going to be like, because I felt like I had been dropped right into the painting Starry Night. So this one is called Woman Sees Starry Night. She leaned in too far, looked in too closely, inhaled far too deeply. She breathes in the insane staccato stutter of color. Her mouth fills with a tempest of climbing moss green. Her nose clogs with waves of blush. All at once, she is drowning in the moving stillness of oil on canvas. She is being wrapped so tightly in a matrix of color she cannot escape. The blue realm is awash in rushing silence, too loud to be quiet. Were her hands not tied in throes of umber, she would have pressed them against her ears. Bursts of white light explode behind her closed eyes. Rough turquoise scrapes her shins. Slivers of marigold cut her knuckles through to the white meat. She leaned in too far, looked in too closely, inhaled the insane staccato stutter of color. She only wanted to see what he saw, glimpse the duende that made a world of flat canvas. She just wanted to know him, perhaps find him in the mountains that seemed too high to scale, but low enough to fly over. There is no room to move or orient. There is only color. Color counting time, color singing and shouting and spitting into her face, all because she wanted to know him. She notices a small church hugging the ground. Its pale, whitewashed blue steeple moans a fervent prayer for morning. She longs to rest in its pews, to feel the familiar pull of gravity, to be sure, but she is Icarus being pulled into his crude representation of the moon. Tangerine crescent, apricot halo, a hint of lemon back shadow. She feels herself yielding. She is willing to be shattered into pieces of color. So I'll do one more ekphrastic poem about a painting. So this is thank you note to Picasso upon viewing Woman Ironing, 1904. This was during his blue period. And after I saw the painting, I felt like I needed to say thank you. I too have been the woman ironing, with only one dagger of a shoulder pointing heavenward, all else homebound, a tethered resolve to smooth and straighten. When a woman works, scarcely few notice the palette of blues she becomes. Parched lips in snowflake, or the bruised crescents under her eyes, least of all, her hair fading to powder. Not in fields of heather or tomes of poetry. Instead, she labors in the bluing agent of laundry never ends. It circles from bureau to body to basket, into scrub board, blue-veined hands, and then it hangs under threatening skies to dry until a woman irons again with only one dagger of a shoulder pointing heavenward, all else homebound, tethered. Gonna keep an eye on the time. I think I have time for one more. When I was a little girl, my mother loved to play opera, and one of the operas that she played over and over was Porgy and Bess. And then for a while, it returned again to Broadway, and I bought the soundtrack and listened to it again. It brought back a lot of memories. And then, of course, now I'm listening to it as an adult, and I'm realizing that Gershwin has written this opera about Black people, and he himself was not a part of the culture. And I wondered what that meant and who can write stories. And so I put Gershwin in conversation with Bess, who was one of the leads in the opera. So this is Bess to Gershwin. For us, it spill out in song. At first, hushed as old men's sorrow, then thunder, rolling like a hurricane in summertime. For you, what'd it be like to find say-so in the wide open jaws of Black faces, white teeth gnashing out, the age-old mourn and moan to a white God so high up, you gotta holler to be heard over the wind. What you know about what's for keeps, what you know about wanting, and what be gone, 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 what you know about having plenty of nothing. You tell me what wound's gonna bleed when lies blew the air. You tell me how to pray all the day, pray to keep the devil away, keep from fretting about hell. What you know about rot gut grief or how to undust the happy. Tell me what is necessarily so in the morning time, evening time, summertime, wintertime. You telling me sing, laugh, and dance for you. All you know is we're gonna take it up, grip it, smooth it, soothe it into song. We're gonna take it up, even walk it on across the river, no ways tired. We already know it takes a long pull to get there. We already know it takes a long pull to get there, wherever you're getting to. I think that's my 15 to 20.
Wow. Oh, thank you so much, Antoinette. I have to say, that last poem, the Porgy and Bess poem, really, and your introduction to it really reminds me of something that I feel has to happen in the world of poetry, you know, to start having conversations about what we can say about each other or create in our art without being appropriative. So that was just stellar. Wanted to ask you with the phrases. I know I did a workshop with Kwame Dawes down at Poet House, and he feels very strongly that ekphrasis is a portal into learning about yourself by viewing someone else's creation. Could you talk, do you agree, A, and B, if so, could you talk about that a little bit?
That's very interesting. Yes, I've worked with Kwame before, and you know, he is an oracle. So of course I would never disagree with anything Kwame Dawes said. I write quite a bit of ekphrastic poetry. I've written a lot of poems about paintings and about other works of art and sculpture and that type of thing. And I think for me, it's a way to access it. I'm looking at it, and I'm enjoying it, but for me, still, my first language is poetry. And so I often say, I don't really know what I believe until I've written about it. And so I take the time to kind of delve into it and put some type of language around it. And then I experience it, I think, more fully. And that might be about knowing more about myself, because I think that we don't see things necessarily as they are. We see things as we are through our own lens of experience. And sometimes I find answers and sometimes I find more questions. But as I get older, I find that I'm comfortable with questions. and I'm comfortable with not knowing. Yeah, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Now, I know well, I'd love to have you discuss a little bit about what some of your hopes and goals are for your term as the State Poet Laureate. And then also, as part of that, to talk a little bit about an event you have been coming up in West Haven in a little while. So
Yes, yes. So I'm very, very excited about this opportunity, of course, to be the state's poet laureate. And what I hope to be accomplishing during my tenure is what I like to call collaborations and connections. So I have had the wonderful opportunity to have worked in collaborative to have worked on collaborative projects recently at my college, Capital Community College, where we have a program called Hartford Heritage, where we go out into the city of Hartford and turn it into a classroom, take students to historical landmarks, and have them see how their city fits into Connecticut history. That project gave birth to the Black Heritage Project, where we turn an eye to Black individuals and Indigenous individuals and how they play into Connecticut history. And then I was invited by a past poet laureate from Connecticut that I'm sure you all know, Marilyn Nelson. She invited a group of us to write poetry based on witness stones that were being placed where formerly enslaved people had served in Connecticut in Old Lyme. And generally, when I write poetry, I'm by myself, right? And the poetry doesn't go out until I ask a reader or until it gets published or whatever. But this time, we were going and writing and coming back and discussing what we were finding, and we were doing research, and we were working with a historian. Well, all of these experiences, it kind of came together. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to do in my position as poet laureate, I said, you know, I want people to come together and to share experiences and to share information and to work on projects that would not have ever come together if not for people sharing and talking and being in the same space. And so that's what I want to do as poet laureate, to create those opportunities for marginalized voices, for all voices to have a place. So the event that we have coming up is called Poets Are Not a Luxury. Some of you may be very familiar with the Audre Lorde piece, Poetry is Not a Luxury. And so we kind of took that and put a little spin on it, because I think it's important for us to have poets laureate. I think, you know, Jaida, bringing young people in is going to ensure that we constantly have, you know, these free-flowing ideas. Having poets laureates in individual cities and regions also coming together is going to ensure that poetry is available to all people and that it's for all people. One of my favorite poems by Ruth Foreman is Poetry Should Ride the Bus. And it's all of the places that you can find poetry, and they're everyday places where everyday people live. So on the 19th, Saturday, from 2 to 5 p.m. in the beautifully redone West Haven High School, we are all going to come together. We're going to have a panel of municipal poets and poet laureates from around the state. And we're going to talk about the importance of poets and poetry in society and begin to collaborate and talk about ways that we can work together to create synergy and to bring more programming to Connecticut. And I want to really thank Arts West Connecticut and Elm City Lit Festival and the Arts Council of Greater New Haven for partnering with us to do this. And Eleanor Slumba has done a fabulous job of reaching out and pulling people together to work on this. So I hope that people will attend. We're sending out notices, and you'll be able to hear more about it as the time approaches. So I think that was a very long answer to your question.
Well, it was the perfect answer to my question. And it also links into something that Jaida said when she mentioned that as a poet, it's your job to be able to explain things that trouble our society. I mean, poetry is increasingly being seen as a political act. So it's great that, it's not a luxury. It's not a luxury at all. Jaida, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to agree with you and say that it isn't a luxury. We have to be able to talk about things. And it reminds me of an Emily Dickinson poem where she says, tell the truth, but tell it slant. And she uses the image of how one can't look directly into the sun. But if you turn your face, you can see the light and you're able to take it in. And I think poetry does that. It frames it and makes it digestible. We can get it when we start talking about pizza and people stepping off of sidewalks. We get that. And so that becomes an avenue by which we can talk about larger issues. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, that's excellent. Jaida, would you share some of your hopes? And oh, by the way, how long, Jaida, is your term as Youth Poet Laureate?
That is a great question that I have the answer to. I don't know. It's hard being the Youth Poet Laureate for Connecticut when I'm in Missouri, 1,000 miles away, but I want to make sure that the next Youth Poet Laureate and the next poets, the next young ones to come in are they know they can say anything. I want you to come up here. There's nothing you can't say. There's nothing you can't put into words. There's nothing that you can't say. There's nothing you can't do. So I really want them to know that, because it's scary to go up there and here's my soul, in a couple of words. And I want everyone to know that not only is it fun to do it, but it's exciting, it's soul wrenching, and it's inherently creative.
And transformative, for not just for you, but for other people as well. So that's great. That's great. Do you have a question for each other, Antoinette and Jaida, by any chance?
Do you want to go first? I can go first.
You can go first, Jaida.
I find our styles incredibly different, but how do you write in the way that you do? What makes you pick the structure that you do?
You know what? That's so funny, because I had that same question for you as I was reading your book. I was like, I wonder why she's chosen this particular form. I tend to write in a lot of form. I'm a person who loves structure. I love rules and grammar and all kinds of things where there's structure. And so when I start out to write a poem, before I even begin the poem, I may not know where the poem's going or what I want to say, because I really believe in discovery on the page. But beforehand, I will usually know what the form is going to be. So if I'm going to write something with repeating lines like a villanelle, I love to write villanelles, I will work on those two repeating lines over and over and over again till I think they're just about right. before I even go on with the rest of the poem, because I know that I want to write a line that's worth repeating. If it's just a moment, a crystallized moment or meditation, I know I'm going to write in a very short form. And so I'll start thinking, more in line of, like a haiku or something, and I'll whittle that poem down and whittle that poem down. I sometimes do write in free verse, but even when I write in free verse, I will make some type of form for myself. I'll say, okay, well, we're going to limit this line, all lines to 7 syllables or something like that, so that I begin to see where that structure is so that I can kind of work within those confines. And, that's kind of how I begin. I was looking at your form, and it seems like you like really lush lines, that they're very long, almost prosaic lines. And I thought that was very interesting, but that also you gave the reader space in between those long, lush lines to give us an opportunity to breathe and to digest. And I was just wondering how you came upon that as almost a signature style.
Unlike you, I find structure completely and utterly suffocating. I cannot do it. I don't know why. I cannot do it. I don't know how to use grammar. I can't. So I think it goes in the way of how I'm thinking. So if I'm thinking it, this is just how it's going to be. So I guess it's not purposeful at all, but rather I think so quickly and I speak so much and I have so many thoughts and I want it all to be completed. And I also because I used to find poetry really boring as a kid. So I want to make sure that everything makes sense and that everything is like fully thought out.
That's interesting, because I'm going to share with you, like, if you go back and read my first book, there's it's all free verse. Mm-hmm. When I was in my graduate program, Eloise Klein-Healy, who is the founding chair of our program, she said to me once, Antoinette, I think you need to, start working in form. And I was like, no, form is constraining. And at that time, I was, going through a divorce. And so I had this whole notion that I wanted to be free of everything, right? And she said to me something very interesting. She said, sometimes when you work with very big subjects, it's like nailing Jello to a wall and you need a container. And I didn't really understand that. And she said, well, her mother was dying and she had written this book and it was like they were all sonnets. And so when I started to write my second book, I was writing about love, which is this big blob of amorphous, what is it, really? And I found that having a unifying image going through, which was Icarus, and then writing in form helped me not be so vague and mushy, but it gave substance. So I hope at some point you'll play around with form. The funny thing is, I sent my second book to Eloise after I had finished it. And I said, you're going to get a kick out of this, because the whole book was in form. And she remembered that conversation that we had. So it was really kind of cool. But maybe you and I will have a conversation in the future and you'll say, Antoinette, I'm really liking that villanelle right now.
There's one question in the chat that I wanted to run by Jaida. It's for Jaida, and it's from Kara Peters. I'm going to do a kind of abbreviated version of it, but where'd it go? Okay, hold on. It's up here. Got to scroll up. Okay, so she says, as I am a high school English teacher and unfortunately don't have much experience teaching slam poetry, I was wondering if you could share a bit of your process with us. Do you start with a point you're passionate about, an image, an issue, and then build from there? Is there a certain structure you follow? And what advice could you offer a novice teacher of slam?
Okay, of course. I love this question. I'll use my college essay poem as an example. I'll start off with an idea. So that idea was like, I want to write about me and my dad. And I'm like, okay, but how do I want to write about this? I don't know. How do I feel about this? I also don't know. So I was like, and I also don't like outwardly saying things. Like, I feel this about this. I want to tie it into something. So for example, I didn't know how to explain that my father was this unstable being. So I was like, okay, let me Google what are unstable things. Jupiter. Oh my God, crazy, right? And then from there, I was able to tie in all of these little like niche things into one thing. Yeah, I think that's what it is. I start off with an idea and I'm like, I don't want to tell you. I want you to find out. I want you to learn something, not only about me, but about something completely like obscure and random. So I think that's how I do it.
That's wonderful. How about you, Antoinette? What's your process? And what's your practice? And are you an everyday writer or?
I would like to be an everyday writer, but I have a very full life. When my kids were very young, I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I would write from 4 to 6. I would wake the kids up at 6 and we'd get ready to go to school. And I did that as long as I could, but then the older you get, you know, your body rebels against you. So what I do is I am very meticulous about scheduling. And so I actually schedule my writing time in and around everything else. So that's how I work on it. I was thinking about when I was reading Jaida's book about, you know, Jupiter and the pizza, and there were all of these wonderful tidbits of information. And sometimes for me, I will hear something and it's like, whoa, that is so neat. A lot of my poems, a lot of the images of my poems came from NPR's Science Fridays, because I'd be driving and that would come on and there'd be like a bird call, you know, and there'd be this and this animal does this. And then I'd be like, oh, these are all great images. So in my first book, there's like tons and tons of natural images because of Science Friday. If I'm watching something on TV, like the glass blowers or whatever, that's been something that I've been into. I will end up finding, you know, little images there. I used to joke about how the only thing that I ever watched on ESPN was the Scripps Spelling Bee, because I wanted to hear different words and then they would show up in my poem, you know, somehow. And even if it wasn't that word, maybe the definition of that word would show up. And oftentimes I'll do just like Jaida said, it's like, you know, what can I tie this to that people will understand? So Jaida, I was wondering too, that you said like you Googled unstable things and came up with Jupiter. What other ways do you find stuff?
I used to take a lot of my stuff from like philosophy. So again, like at the end of that like college writing poem, I was like, okay, but how do I feel about this? And I was like, okay, well, I guess this could be inherently considered a tragedy. So who has already found the words to explain how I'm feeling? And that just happened to be Aristotle. Like he managed to find the words that I couldn't. So when I can't find the words, I find other people who have, or I found theories that have already done that.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So we're kind of, I don't know, hunter-gatherers, so to speak. We hear a word, we learn, you know, a philosophy, and all of that gets turned around into poetry. What are your goals for your poetry past even, you know, the Poet Laureateship, just in the future?
That's a great question. Lately, I've been very out of the poetry loop. I guess it's because I'm so far away, but this really was really so much fun. So I want to thank you guys all just now, but I want to write more. I haven't written since like high school, so I want to write more. I want to have a better book. I want to inspire people. I want to meet other poets. I want to learn about their inspirations, their drives, what makes them happy, what makes them write the way they write. Because you were talking about forms, and I was thinking about that. And I had a friend last week, and he was like, Jaida, brevity is a talent, and you don't have it. And I found that really funny, but it's also like outside of the cruelty of the joke. The funny part is it's like the way people see the world and the way things are written down fascinates me. So yeah.
You may find as time goes by that you change your style very much. I mean, going from narrative to that brief lyrical thing, it happens. I mean, it just depends on the topic and how you are reacting to the topic. So but I love your narrative style. It's one, as you call yourself, a storyteller. It's just, it's wonderful and rich, as Antoinette described it. I think we need to end now. We're running a little bit over, which is wonderful. And I want to say thank you not only to Antoinette and Jaida, but also to Lucy Handley and the wonderful Ridgefield Library. They offer such an incredible platform for poetry programming. I go to them with an idea and they go, yep, sure. I love that, which is wonderful. So they've made my job as Ridgefield Poet Laureate really easy. So
That's
Lucy,
because you're the best, Barb.
oh, I know. Well, everyone, thank you for coming and spending the evening with us. Jaida, thank you for taking time from your schoolwork. I'm sure you have a lot to do tonight. Antoinette, I know your schedule is just crazy too, and I hope to see you up in New Haven in a couple of weeks. So
Yes, yes. I want to say thank you to everyone for spending the evening with us. And I want to say thank you, Jaida, too, because I was so excited to read with you and to see the young people coming in and taking up space. I really, really like that. It makes me very hopeful for the future. Thank you, Barb, for holding all of this together and giving it shape and form. You've done a fabulous job.
Yeah,
everyone,
thank you.
Go ahead.
Amazing, fun, lovely.
Everyone, read more poetry.
Yes.
Buy these poets' books. That's and we'll be in touch with more poetry events and readings and programming. So thank you, everyone, and good night.
Yeah.
Night.
So let me just stop.